Elon Musk's $100,000 ticket to Mars. We don't know about you, but to us, 2016 ranks among the most outstanding years in the 21st century. In perhaps the most eagerly anticipated aerospace announcement of the year, SpaceX founder Elon Musk revealed his grand plan to establish a human settlement on Mars. Yep, we're going to colonize the red planet, or maybe even the aliens residing there. But that's easier said than done, right? Well, Musk always has a plan, and there's a great possibility of humans living on Mars. So stay tuned, grab some popcorn, and relax as we tell you how Elon Musk will take us to Mars in the SpaceX Starship. In late October 2001, Elon Musk traveled to Russia with the hopes of buying 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles for $20 million. Flush with cash after co-founding PayPal, his plan was to use the rockets to blast a robotic greenhouse to Mars and grow plants using Martian soil. Mars Oasis, as the project was known, would produce the first oxygen on the red planet and would serve Musk's greater goal of reigniting public interest in human space exploration. But the Russians didn't take the young dot-com millionaire seriously, and no deal was ever made. Instead, Musk set about creating SpaceX to build his own rockets for a fraction of the price. Nearly 2 decades later, and roughly $200 billion richer, Musk is actually on the cusp of building a rocket capable of interplanetary space travel, and has already secured a multi-billion-dollar contract with NASA to use it to land astronauts on the moon. Starship is currently humanity's best chance of reaching Mars, with no other private company or government space agency yet to put a program in place that'll send humans any further than the moon. SpaceX is hoping to achieve crewed missions to Mars before the end of the decade. In short, Musk thinks it's possible to begin shuttling thousands of people between Earth and our smaller, redder neighbor sometime within the next decade or so. And not too long after that, perhaps 40 or 100 years later, Mars could be home to a self-sustaining colony of 1 million people. This is not about everyone moving to Mars. This is about becoming multi-planetary, he said on September 27th at the International Astronautical Congress in Guadalajara, Mexico. This is really about minimizing existential risk and having a tremendous sense of adventure. Musk's timeline sounds ambitious, and that's something he already acknowledges. I think the technical outline of the plan is about right. He also didn't pretend that it was going to be easy and that they were going to do it in 10 years, said Bobby Braun, NASA's former chief technologist, who's now at Georgia Tech University. I mean, who's to say what's possible in 100 years? And for those wondering whether we should go at all, the reason for Musk making Mars an imperative is simple. The future of humanity is fundamentally going to bifurcate along one of 2 directions. Either we're going to become a multi-planet species and a spacefaring civilization, or we're going to be stuck on one planet until some eventual extinction event, Musk told Ron Howard during an interview for National Geographic Channel's Mars. For me to be excited and inspired about the future, it's gotta be the first option. It's gotta be, we're going to be a spacefaring civilization, Musk added. Though he admitted his exact timeline is fuzzy, Musk thinks it's possible humans could be flying to Mars by the mid-2020s, and he thinks the plan for getting there will go something like this. It starts with a really big rocket, something at least 200 feet tall when fully assembled. In a simulation of what SpaceX calls its interplanetary transport system, a spacecraft loaded with astronauts will launch on top of a 39-foot wide booster that produces a whopping 28 million pounds of thrust. Using 42 Raptor engines, the booster will accelerate the assemblage to 5,374 miles an hour. Overall, the whole thing would be 3.5 times more powerful than NASA's Saturn V rocket, the largest rocket built to date, which carried the Apollo missions to the moon. Perhaps not coincidentally, the SpaceX rocket would launch from the same pad, 39A, at Kennedy Space Center in Cape Canaveral, Florida. The rocket would deliver the crew capsule to orbit around Earth. Then the booster would steer itself toward a soft landing back at the launch pad, a feat that SpaceX rocket boosters have been doing for almost a year now. Next, the booster would pick up a fuel tanker and carry that into orbit, where it would fuel the spaceship for its journey to Mars. Once en route, the spaceship would deploy solar panels to harvest energy from the sun and conserve valuable propellant for what promises to be an exciting landing on the red planet. As Musk envisions it, fleets of these crew-carrying capsules will remain in Earth orbit until a favorable planetary alignment brings the 2 planets close together, something that happens every 26 months. We'd ultimately have upward of 1,000 or more spaceships waiting in orbit, and so the Mars colonial fleet would depart en masse, Musk says. The key to his plan is reusing the various spaceships as much as possible. I just don't think there's any way to have a self-sustaining Mars base without reusability. I think this is really fundamental, Musk says. If wooden sailing ships in the old days were not reusable, I don't think the United States would exist. Musk anticipates using each rocket booster 1,000 times, each tanker 100 times, and each spaceship 12 times. In the beginning, he imagines that maybe 100 humans would be hitching a ride on each ship, with that number gradually increasing to more than 200. By his calculations then, putting 1 million people on Mars could take anywhere from 40 to 100 years after the first ship launches. And no, it would not necessarily be a one-way trip. I think it's very important to give people the option of returning, Musk says. After landing a few cargo-carrying spacecraft without people on Mars, starting with the Red Dragon capsule, Musk says the human phase of colonization could begin. For sure, landing a heavy craft on a planet with a thin atmosphere would be difficult. It was tough enough to gently lower NASA's Curiosity rover to the surface, and at 2,000 pounds, that payload weighed just a fraction of Musk's proposed vessels. For now, Musk plans to continue developing supersonic retro rockets that can gradually and gently lower a much heavier spacecraft to the Martian surface, using his reusable Falcon 9 boosters as a model. And that's not all these spacecrafts will need. Hurtling through the Martian atmosphere at supersonic speeds will test even the most heat-tolerant materials on Earth, so it's no small task to design a spacecraft that can withstand a heated entry and propulsive landing, and then be refueled and sent back to Earth so that it can start all over again. The first journeys would primarily serve the purpose of delivering supplies and establishing a propellant depot on the Martian surface, a fuel reservoir that could be tapped into for return trips to Earth. After that depot is set up and cargo delivered to the surface, the fun can sort of begin. Early human settlers will need to be good at digging beneath the surface and dredging up buried ice, which will supply precious water and be used to make the cryomethane fuel that will power the whole enterprise. As such, the earliest interplanetary spaceships would probably stay on Mars, and they would be carrying mostly cargo, fuel, and a small crew. Builders and fixers who are the hardy explorer type, Musk said to Howard. Are you prepared to die? If that's okay, then you're a candidate for going. While there will undoubtedly be intense competition and a lot of fanfare over those first few seats on the Mars-bound mission, Musk worries that too much emphasis will be placed on those early boot prints. In the sort of grander historical context, what really matters is being able to send a large number of people, like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and ultimately millions of tons of cargo, he says. I actually care much more about that than, say, the first few trips. In short, his vision for establishing a settlement on Mars is more an endurance sport than a sprint. In fact, the company has performed multiple successful test flights of Starship, although landing attempts after the last 4 high-altitude flights ended in fiery explosions. Despite the prototype's destruction, SpaceX sees the test flights as progress towards creating a fully reusable rocket. SpaceX's current Falcon fleet of rockets is partially reusable, as the company can land and reuse the rocket's boosters. But Musk hopes Starship transforms space travel into something more akin to commercial air travel. The rocket's enormous size would also make it capable of launching several times as much cargo at once. For comparison, while SpaceX's Falcon 9 rockets can send as many as 60 Starlink satellites at a time, SpaceX says Starship will be able to launch 400 Starlink satellites at a time. Musk remains highly confident that SpaceX will land humans on Mars by 2026, saying last December that it's an achievable goal about 6 years from now. He added that SpaceX plans to send a Starship rocket without a crew in 2 years. In the meantime, SpaceX has many milestones to go before Starship can carry passengers. The rocket has yet to reach orbit. Musk last year said that the company will fly hundreds of missions with satellites before we put people on board. Now, Musk may be focused on Mars, but the hurdles of Starship's development are not lost on the space billionaire. It's a tough vehicle to build because we're trying to crack this nut of a rapid and fully reusable rocket, Musk said. But the thing that's really important to revolutionize space is a rapidly reusable rocket that's reliable too.